Before we start the video, I want to give you the link to this free guide. So this is a used car inspection checklist that I personally made. I have spent a lot of years working on vehicles, working on other people's vehicles, checking other people's cars out. And this guide right here will show you everything that you need to check the car as well as online before you even consider buying it, and things you can do to actually reduce the purchase price too. This video might be the longest one that I've ever made, but it's the most important. So head over to this link, www.fixyourcar.net. I will put the link down in the description below. All right, now check out the video. Well, hello. Welcome to the Fix Your Car YouTube channel. My name is Eric, and I'm going to be... So, I want to take a minute. I want to talk about this first page that I wrote. And the first thing you want to do is you want to verify what the person is charging for the vehicle, or the dealership that's charging for the vehicle is charging a proper price. You do not want to overpay for a vehicle ever. Ever. Don't ever overpay for a vehicle. If there's some negotiation in there, start off with it in the beginning. If not, then the next thing you're going to want to do is go get the Carfax at the website that I listed in here. You can get a cheap Carfax on there for, I think, $6.99, and normally they're about $40. If you're getting it from a dealership, though, they should provide you with that Carfax. When you do check out the Carfax, make sure that the title is not branded as salvage, rebuilt salvage, total salvage, any of that. If it contains the word salvage, do not buy it. When you're looking at the Carfax, pay particular attention to the maintenance intervals. How many miles it has. Were things done on time? Did they get oil changes, at the proper intervals? Did they stretch them out way too far? Things like that. Now, I will say less than 25% of people maintain their cars correctly. So don't expect perfection here, but just look to see that they actually did do some maintenance. If they're a DIY person like myself, where they don't take it to a shop or anything and there's no information on it, ask them if they kept records. Really kind of the only way to know. Next, if all that works out okay, then you're going to want to tell them you want to go for a test drive. And this is the part where you're going to see where most of the issues are, is in the actual test drive itself. If you hear strange noises, weird smells, things don't feel right, they feel like loose or wobbly, you'll notice them on the test drive. This inspection, you're going to have to, if they are not okay with you doing it yourself, make sure to clear it with them ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to want to take this inspection form to a garage and have them check all these things. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to check everything, and I want you to literally check everything. I'm going to show you the example car that we're going to use, and I'll provide a little backstory on why I'm making this video. But the backstory to this car, if I had done a pre-purchase inspection, I would have not bought this vehicle. And this is something I'm going to pass on to you, because I consider myself somewhat an expert DIYer, mechanic type, and I got take advantage of on this one. And when when you do your test drive, you're going to want to test it in a bunch of different scenarios: stop and go traffic, on the highway, and we'll show you all that in the video. And then if all that checks out okay, then we're going to go to our next step and do our pre-purchase inspection. So for this inspection, you're going to want to have a flashlight, a jack, some jack stands, a code reader, possibly one that'll read, short-term fuel trim, and some clean white rags and a magnet. Other than that, let's show you how to do this pre-purchase inspection. Folks, what's going on? It's time to do our checklist. So today, before we get started, what we're going to do is check, before we start the car, we're going to check everything underneath the hood. Fluid levels, just basic kind of check before we get going. So I'm going to show you guys that real quick, and then we'll start our test drive, because that will reveal most problems. Okay, so when we're underneath the car, we're going to look at all of our fluid levels. So one of the first things I like to check real quick, just see if the engine is all sludged up, is opening up the oil cap. First, you can see if there's like any sludge or gunk in there, and then turn on my light. You can look down in here in the crankcase and see if you have any sludgy deposits. And I actually don't see any. It looks shiny and gold, which is the good thing you want to see. It means there's not a bunch of sludge buildup in the motor. Next thing you'll want to check is your oil level. Battery terminals. It's got a little corrosion on there. I want to check the date of the battery. That's hard to see on here, but it looks like that was done in 2020. Coolant level looks good. The air filter, maybe just looking at it off the top, just a basic little look, looks clean. And then look at our brake fluid level. Looks about halfway through. So this is like kind of a basic way to check the brakes. It's just looking at the fluid level and noticing if it's worn all the way down to the minimum, which means the brake pads are super worn. If it's all the way at the max, it means the brake pads are probably just got replaced. So these brake pads most likely have about 50% life. Don't rely on this totally. I'd recommend actually looking at the brakes, the rotors themselves. This is just a quick check and just a basic look, making sure you don't have any leaks. Make sure your coolant hoses are connected. Nothing on the ground leaking underneath that I see. To the backside and check. Nothing that I can tell under there either. So I want to look at our tires too. Recommend, we're going to jack the vehicle up later and look at it, but these have a little bit of wear on the edges, a little bit of dry rot, not a whole bunch. And then just one of the things I always check too, if the thing has had any front end damage and you don't see it in the Autofax or Carfax, sorry, a lot of times you'll see these just basically JB Weld or some kind of plastic repair on these. That indicates it was in a front end collision and it was never reported, and they just did a cheap fix on it. Other than that, this looks good so far. There's a reason why I'm starting on the inside of the engine first. What most people do is they'll go walk around the car, you know, check everything out. Oh, looks good, it's got a few scratches, few dings. That's the least important part of the car. I mean, it's important, don't get me wrong, aesthetics, but it's just that. They're aesthetics. You're not going to get point A to B from just aesthetics alone. You need to have a good quality mechanical, because this is a mechanical thing. It's not just you know, paint. Okay, so we're in our car. We're gonna start it up. Okay, right off the bat, I don't hear anything. First thing I want to do is just listen to the motor. Do you hear any weird ticking sounds? Strong ticks that don't sound normal. This doesn't really have any. I don't hear anything. Could indicate there's something wrong with the engine. Maybe a lifter is going out. Something of that nature. So next thing, just gonna climb back in our vehicle. And I want you to test everything out. You know, does it go, you're going to find this out on the test drive, but does it go in park and drive? That's a major deal killer if it doesn't. Does the heat and the AC work? Does the stereo work? all your gauges, do they work? Is there any check engine lights on? Heated seats, do those work? Your windows, do they work? Every one of them. Have, you know, 2 key fobs. Does it lock, unlock properly? Your mirrors, your interior lights, your sunroof, your glass, does it have any chips or cracks on it? Glass can be very expensive. Locks, unlocks, do all the doors lock and unlock? Your door handles, you want to check those out. Do they open from the inside and the outside? Do the seats, do they adjust? Goes back and forth, up and down. Every one of them, check. The other thing, seat belts. Make sure all your seat belts work, every single one of them. And if you have some child seats, I would buckle those in as well. Make sure that they work before you get a vehicle like this. So this is a minivan. You want to make sure that, you know, all the features you're going to want to use work well. You know, do the sliding doors, do they work? Looks like that works well. Okay, now we're ready for our test drive, so get yourself buckled in and let's put this thing in drive and go. Now, we've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to tell you a story about this van, and this is why you should get a pre-purchase inspection. I bought this van online from AutoNation Express. Sorry to dime you guys out, but they sold me a real crappy product. I got this vehicle sight unseen and got it through the internet and had it delivered to my house. Well, once I got the vehicle, I quickly realized they weren't able to sell this thing, because it was somewhat of a good price, but it should have been lower considering all the things that were wrong with it. So when I got the vehicle, the first thing I noticed right away is it had a smoke smell to it. Now, mind you, this is 2023. I mean, we have all kinds of ways of getting rid of smoke smell, and this thing smelled like an ashtray. It was absolutely disgusting. And that was the first red flag. And then once I started up the car, I just could hear this awful growling noise come from the engine bay. And I thought to myself, what in the world is that? And I noticed it coming more from the drive belt side, so I was like, well, maybe it's a bad tensioner, maybe it's something like that. I, kind of started inspecting everything. I was like, nope, it's not that. Then I looked at the water pump and I noticed, ooh, that thing is going out. That's where the noise is coming from, because it was loose from the pulley side. And I started doing some research, and I come to find out that the water pumps are notorious for going out on these 3.5s on the Toyotas. I don't know if it's just on like the Siennas or the sideways configured 3.5s, but nonetheless, the water pump was going out, and it all has to do with the small it has too small of a bearing in there and wears out prematurely. So that was the other thing. And then once I was trying to get my kids in the car, I noticed that the passenger side sliding door would not work. It would open, but then it would like 3/4 the way close and just retract back. And I was like, oh man. And I've never owned a minivan before, so I didn't know if I was doing something wrong. I asked a couple people that own minivans, and they're like, no, it should work just fine. And come to find out, the item that goes out on the Siennas is the pulley cable. There's some kind of joint in there that corrodes. I think it's a dissimilar metal corrosion. That's what it looked like, because this vehicle came from Arizona. There shouldn't have been any kind of rust or corrosion from salt or road grime or anything like that. So that was the other problem. Now, luckily, I was able to fix all those problems, but the water pump, if I would have taken it to a shop, is a $2,500 job. The sliding door, it was somewhere in between like $1,500. So, you know, you're looking at, you know, a small fortune just to fix these problems. The water pump it's fairly DIY friendly. It takes a long time. It takes about 8 hours to do. At least that's what it took me. Maybe it'd take a shop a little less. So all this to say, get a pre-purchase inspection done. They usually only, if you pay for it, it usually only costs $200-300. I do recommend doing it yourself, because nobody's going to check out the vehicle better than you are. And, you know, take all day to do it. Ask the owner if you can, you know, check these things out on your own, and just check everything. Make sure everything works, because if something doesn't work, you have no idea what it costs to fix it. And, you know, in that case of the sliding door, you know, some people could live with it, but if you got little kids, that's the reason why people buy these minivans. Is, you know, you go park in a parking lot and you don't want to have to deal with getting the kids out, and you're trying to fit in between the door and opening it at the same time. There's a reason why people that have minivans love them, and if it doesn't have a working sliding door, then, you know, why would they? Most likely would not want it. So this brings me to the next portion. Is we're doing our road test. We're just checking out the general drive and functionality of the vehicle. You want to drive this in both types of environments. You want to just do regular city stop and go driving, and then you want to do you know, cruising on the highway, and check everything out. Make sure you know, you don't hear any strange sounds or anything like that when you're going down the road from the motor. Make sure the transmission doesn't slip. Does it feel like it's engaging properly? Hear any weird noises from the wheels, like the wheel bearings? That'll be like more of a growl, low growl, high growl sound, stuff like that. Check everything out. Do you hear any weird noises coming from the power steering when you turn the wheel? This is where you discover a lot of problems. Doesn't mean you're going to see everything on the road test, but what you don't catch on the road test, you'll for sure catch after we do our in-depth inspection. And this is all to kind of do in sequential order from wasting your own time. You know, looking at a car. There's a reason why I'm going to show you to look at the exterior last, and because it's actually the least important part of the vehicle, other than the undercarriage. You want to make sure, if you live in a rust area, you want to be looking at the undercarriage and seeing if there's large amounts of rust underneath it, because that makes the vehicle structurally unsafe, and then it should be a salvage title. But there's all kinds of people nowadays selling junk cars that are rusted out that apparently don't have salvage titles. So let's drive this around for a little while. Let's check it out on the road, and then if all that checks out well, take it to our little area and inspect things further. Okay, well, we're coming to the part of our video where we're gonna get at this on the highway, really check it out. So we're gonna press on the accelerator, you know, as hard as we can, as fast as we can. Just make sure you're in a safe area to do it. Don't be doing it, you know, around a lot of cars or traffic. You're just doing this not to hot rod, but you know, to kind of stress the system a little bit and see if you hear any weird sounds or noises coming from the motor. Seen sluggish or anything like that. I was driving this one on the stop and go. I didn't really notice anything. The only thing I noticed when I went over a speed bump, I heard kind of a squeak from the suspension. It could indicate a worn out shock or something in the suspension system. So we'll make a note of that and check it out once we get back to home base and check everything out. So let's do our fast acceleration test and see if we notice anything here wrong with the Sienna. Okay, so you ready for a countdown? Let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go! Oh yeah, that gets up on it. So I like doing a 0 to 60 kind of test, and just that kind of reveals to me normal sort of driving speeds, or if you'd have to really press on it in an emergency. Typical real world scenario where you'd need to kind of get on the acceleration fast. This vehicle, it shifted smoothly, it accelerated properly, so I think our engine and transmission are working just fine. I don't notice anything wrong with the powertrain system. Noises, no kind of loud squeals. Sometimes you'll hear that, a loud squeal come from the engine if a tensioner or something's going out. High kind of and short durations. But I don't notice any of that, so let's get this thing back to home base. Let's you know, get it up off the wheels. Let's check out some other stuff more in depth, and this will really kind of be the last step in our purchase inspection. If you don't really notice anything wrong other than the things that you're driving in, then you want to just check the individual systems for things that might be going out or might need addressed in the future. So let's do that. Okay, folks, we're back at the home base. We're going to finish the sort of the last part of our inspection. For this part, you're going to need a good flashlight. And I recommend you can use your own car jack and nut wrench. Do use a support jack behind it, though, if you're going to be underneath the vehicle. But raise up your vehicle, look on the underside, and we're going to inspect the engine, the underside, all the different components, and the last thing you're going to want to need if you're doing kind of this in-depth inspection is you're going to want a scan tool that can read short-term fuel trim. That will give you an indication of how the motor's operating. And then I always like to take off an easily accessible spark plug and inspect the spark plug for its condition. Checking the spark plug will tell you a lot about the condition of the motor. This particular vehicle, it does have a sealed transmission, so it doesn't have a dipstick that you can check the fluid. So in this case, I would actually take it to a mechanic and have them check that very specific same thing. Ask, hey, can you do a check on the transmission fluid? Does it smell burnt? All that other stuff. When we're looking at the differentials and the transfer case, we're basically looking for like leaks or anything like that. You can check the condition of the fluid level, kind of the same as I mentioned before with the transmission, but just make note to look in the service records for that. The last thing I'll say, if the vehicle has spotty oil changes or you don't see like any history, I would recommend you take it to a mechanic and have them check, do a compression test and a cylinder leak down check. That tests the cylinders for proper compression. Basically, if they did, bad oil changes, compression test would reveal that, meaning that the piston ring up against the cylinder wall has a gap between it, or it's starting to wear, and it's letting oil come by and burn in the combustion process, which will also show up in the spark plug when you take that out. So without further ado, let's start checking out this vehicle. Okay, so first thing, we're going to start on the top side, and we're just going to kind of methodically kind of make our way through the engine bay. You're kind of looking for loose frayed wiring, frayed hoses, any kind of leaks anywhere. This is just the inspection on the top side, and just make careful note of everything. We've already looked at all the fluid levels. I would check them again just to make sure that nothing changed and they didn't top anything off right before you got here. Check, this is your anti-lock braking system. Check these lines, make sure there's no leaks coming from here. Pull off this engine cover. We're gonna let this cool for a while, but later we're gonna pull this spark plug here. It's the most easily accessible one, and we're gonna look at the spark plug, but we're gonna let it cool down a little bit first. And I don't see anything on the top side. One thing I like about this motor, and it might sound a little bit obscure, I like the fact that it's dirty, because lots of times people will clean motors before you come and check them out, and they look nice, but they were really just cleaning up a leak. So this dirty motors are actually kind of a good thing. They usually reveal where leaks are more easily. And I do notice one thing, this clip is off. That's the PCV valve right there. And I don't see anything else. One thing you could do too, like we did earlier, is just look down in there. And you notice we have shiny metal. It's not black sludged up. That's a good sign. That means that they were probably doing regular oil changes on this thing. Make a special note of the hoses. Check how firm they are. These ones are not bad. There is another hose that goes on the other side over there. It's probably in the same shape. These look original. And then we're going to climb on the bottom side. Okay, once you're underneath, you'll kind of see a little bit more of the full story that's going on. So you want to basically look for any wet spots. Do you see one kind of right here is engine coolant from when we changed out the water pump. And I only know that because I changed this one out. But if you see anything like that, you just want to ask somebody if there was any prior maintenance done. The oil pan looks dry, so it doesn't look like there's any leaks coming from the motor. The transmission looks dry. No leaks coming from there. And then we're going to inspect our suspension and steering. So that's our CV axle there. Typically when these start going out, you'll see the boot rip there, and then you'll see some grease that's being flung on, you know, either the control arm or the shock absorber above. I do notice that that lower ball joint has some grease. It's kind of leaking out, so that ball joint might be worn out. The upper looks okay. We heard some noises from the shock, and I don't know if it's actually coming from that shock or that stabilizer link there, but so what we're gonna do is get it off the ramps and get the weight off of it after we check out the rest of the undercarriage. See if we have any play in those areas. Lots of times, you know, people will say like, oh, your ball joint, you know, is going out, and like, it might be, but it still's got some life left. You just want to check it for play. That's the real kicker on whether it's worn out or not. And our tie rod's look in pretty good shape on this side. Control arm looks good. The other thing you want to be really looking for under here is rust. If you see a lot of rust, then you want to make sure that that rust is okay. Or I would actually get a shop to check it out, because to say that it's acceptable or not is kind of discretionary. This side looks the same as well. CV boots look okay, the inner and the outer. Same thing on the bottom there. That ball joint looks a little greasy and wet. Tie rod looks fine. I can't really tell the brakes, so you might have to take off the wheel, but from the fluid level, it looks like they were a little bit low. The shock, kind of the same thing here. We don't see it leaking from the shock, but we see that stabilizer link, a little bit of a wet area there, connecting to the sway bar. Control arm looks good. You always want to grab these drive shafts and shake them back and forth and make sure they don't have any wobble. Check the exhaust system, make sure it's not rusted or leaking. Looks okay. That looks okay. This drive shaft is in 3 different pieces, so that's kind of remarkable. Also, the transfer case looks fine. Let's keep making our way back. All these lines, they look okay. Exhaust looks fine. Slowly make your way back. There's the gas tank. No leaks coming from the gas tank. That's a good sign. And made it to the rear of the car. There's your rear differential. Don't see any leaks coming from there. I just recently replaced the fluid, so that's not a leak. And then we'll look at these rear CV axles. They look okay. No leaks coming from the shocks. Suspension looks okay. Shake that drive shaft a little. No play either. And we'll come look at the other side over here. Spring looks good. Shock looks dry. CV axle looks good. Exhaust looks fine. And no rust that I can tell. Okay, now that we have the vehicle off the car ramps, we're going to jack up. You're going to do this to both sides of the vehicle. I'm just going to show you one side, but it's the exact same process. Jack up the vehicle, get the weight off the tires. And we're going to do a kind of a steering suspension check. And then we're going to take the wheel off. So you're going to jack up the vehicle first. You don't have to go super high, just get it off the ground. There we go. And what you're going to do is grab the tire side to side. Test for any kind of play. I don't feel any there. And then jack it up a little bit more. Be sure to have a jack stand underneath it as well while you're doing this. And then grab from top to bottom. And same thing. I don't feel any play. So those ball joints, in my opinion, are fine. Now let's take off the wheel. Let's look at the brakes and look at and the shocks and the strut and all that stuff a little closer. Now once you have the tire off, look at the tire more carefully now that it's off the vehicle. Do you see any irregular wear patterns? Meaning that the insides wore out more than, or the insides wore out more than the outside, or the outside is wore more than the inside. This would indicate a condition with the steering suspension, meaning you have a worn ball joint or any of that. And so by doing that test and looking at the tire, I could pretty much say without a shadow of a doubt there's really no issues with the steering suspension. Now we want to take a closer look at everything underneath, so let's look. Okay. Now here's our brakes. That CV axle looks really corroded, but they typically do. The brakes, they look a little bit kind of glazed over. Might tell me that these pads are either cheap or starting to wear out. I don't see any leaks coming from the shocks. Not enough to necessitate a replacement. The lines look good. There's doesn't appear to be any leaking. Now the brake pads, you'll see them right there. That is this little window, and yeah, they kind of appear to be maybe around the 50% mark. They're still okay, but the rotors are maybe the more worn out part. Matter of fact, I can kind of feel edges right there, which means these have probably been on there a while. They might have resurfaced them instead of replaced them. This might be the only thing that I might gripe about and say, hey, it needs new rotors, possibly brake pads, since you're going to replace the rotors. But other than that, I don't see a ton of other things that really need addressed. For the most part, this vehicle looks pretty good. Now, you do want to go check the other side and make sure that it doesn't have any of those problems that I just checked out on this side. And this vehicle too, you can do it on the rear. It's not as crucial as the front, because the front is what controls your alignment. And when I was driving this, I didn't feel any steering wheel pull or anything like that. So I believe everything is fine and working properly. Just the brake rotors, I think that might be a little bit worn out. And so the last thing we're going to do, we're going to go up on the top side of the motor. We're going to pull a spark plug, look at the condition of it, and then the last thing we'll do after that is plug in our code reader and look at the short-term fuel trim. Okay, now we're back inside the engine. We're going to take off one of these spark plugs. So what you do is unclip this little harness here first. And then we're going to disconnect the coil. Right, that's a 16 millimeter. I'll undo that. These spark plugs got a lot of threads, so it seems like you're twisting forever until it comes out. But you'll notice when it's free. That feels free right there. Let's grab it with our magnet. Okay. So, this appears to be a good-looking spark plug. And I'll try to focus the camera as much as I can. But that light brown color is what you're looking for. The big thing to look at is the light brown color. That means that the engine is working properly. You can look at some guides and be able to notice when spark plugs have a lot of black on them, meaning maybe your air fuel mixture is off, it's running too rich, or if it's too lean, they might be a much lighter color. Concerning thing would be if this is like covered in oil, it's real greasy. That means that there's oil getting by your cylinders, your cylinder rings, and it's being burned up in the combustion process. So this looks to be a perfectly healthy spark plug, and I'm going to go out on a limb and assume the other 5 are just like this, because the engine is running just fine. It has plenty of power. There's no reason for me to believe that one of the cylinders is dead or anything like that. So we're going to reinstall this spark plug. Be sure to retorque this when you put it back in. You know, this is not your car yet, and you want to be sure that you're taking proper care of it. Okay, so we're going to plug in our scan tool. Now, it didn't read any faults or errors, so we're gonna go check out our live data. And then we're gonna read our short-term fuel trim. Now, when looking at your short-term fuel trim, anything below 5% is considered pretty good. Now, it is a little bit high on bank 2. So B1 stands for bank 1 and B2 stands for bank 2. I'm willing to bet if we let this run and warm up long enough that it'll actually even out. So everything looks pretty good on this end. The other thing to note is those spark plugs are probably a little bit on the worn side. The vehicle has almost 90,000 miles. Typically the spark plugs, I think the max that you're supposed to go on the iridium plugs is about 120,000. These are probably getting ready to be changed out, so I'm willing to bet if you actually change those out, these numbers will be closer to 0 on everything. So this is the kind of the last check you want to do. Check all your headlights, your turn signals, your parking, your backup, and when you do your backup, check your camera. Make sure that works good. These little things that you don't necessarily think about when you're looking at a car. Walk around the vehicle. There's a reason why I am showing this to you last, because it is kind of the least important part of the vehicle, because you're going to notice if something's damaged, and it's easily noticeable. So most places will try to hide this if there has been any damage. And one thing you can do is just grab yourself a magnet. Find one like this and just move it around the vehicle. Make sure it sticks. If it doesn't stick in an area, say it's like coming up against it and it won't stick, that means it has Bondo there. It's not like metal. But you're just gonna take a cruise around the vehicle, check it out, make sure everything's working okay. I popped the gas door open, make sure that works too. There's a little button on the inside, and then you're good to go. Is how to do a full pre-purchase inspection. Be sure to take your time, look everything over, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, leave no stone unturned. You will thank yourself later if you found something on the front end. And with this particular vehicle, I would mention once you get done looking at everything, if there's anything that needs repaired, bring it up with the owner and ask them if they'll take it off the purchase price. See first what that repair cost, and then ask if they'll take off the price since it needs attention. Other than that, I hope you like this video. Please consider subscribing. Give me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment, and God bless. If you don't subscribe to me, please subscribe to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He won't ever let you down. I might, but he never will. All right, take care. Make it a great day. Bye.